Hi, this is Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett. Thank you for tuning in today to the second part of our 2019 state legislative session recap with my guests, Senator Steve Neville and Representative Montoya. Let's move to the last couple subjects here. House Bill 51 did not pass. So
the abortion bill.
Right, the abortion bill, which made me very happy. What was the premise? What was the point of that bill? What was it trying to do?
Well, the argument was that there's a portion of that bill, it's in the criminal section of law. So back before Roe v. Wade kind of trumped everything else, New Mexico's laws were that if a doctor performed an abortion, that it was a criminal offense. So that's one section of that law. But the other two sections of that law are the definitions about what an abortion is and what a medically necessary termination is. And the other section was that no one could ever be compelled, a hospital or a doctor or a medical provider would ever be compelled against their conscience to have to perform an abortion. So the argument was that portion of law was antiquated, is what they kept saying, that it was out of date, and it was, since there were criminal penalties for something that the proponents of the bill said was a fundamental right, that they were going to do away with the entire section of law. There were thoughts on both sides of the legislature to maybe modify it, but the decision actually was made on both sides exactly the same, which was, no, this is what they're trying to do is not very popular, so let's leave it in its worst version. And so we left it as is in the House, made them vote on it. So they did the same thing.
The worst
in the
version
Senate.
Ultimately could be full-term abortion.
That's what I was going to ask. So it means up till the moment of birth.
Moment of birth.
Moment of birth.
Nothing after birth, but up to the moment of birth. Which is,
Right. Actually, the argument I've been very, very involved in this fight for 5 years, and the particular procedure that takes place actually allows for the possibility of a live birth, and then the child is either left to die unattended, or in other states it's been much worse, where the baby was born alive and crying, and that's not good for business, that the doctors and these facilities would take matters in their own hands. So actually this is a debate that's going on nationally, and because it was going on nationally just prior to it taking place in New Mexico, the uproar was great, and folks in New Mexico didn't even realize that New Mexico's had this practice of abortion up to birth for 10 years.
the component in there that you had mentioned a second ago, though, was the other part was that it was going to force healthcare providers to have to perform abortions. Is that right? They would have to.
Yes.
They couldn't just say, no, I don't do that.
Right.
Which is awful. I mean, it's awful all in all. I think it's awful. I mean, obviously, and I have a wife who's in labor delivery. You know, the number of times that there's a medically induced abortion to save the mother is so rare and far between. I mean, and if that occurs, they do everything they can to try and save the baby and save the mother. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's awful. Either way.
The outcry was great in New Mexico. There were 4 or 5 rallies that took place at the Capitol throughout the 60-day session. Hundreds and thousands of people showed up. I mean, I think the last rally they had was the day before the vote on the Senate floor, and there were 700 or so people that were there. And that was on a really bad weather day. Folks made it from Albuquerque, drove when the roads were horrible. And I think, to be honest, I think that had a little bit of an effect on the floor vote on the Senate.
It's so important.
And we were able to make it less uncomfortable on the Senate side for some of the conservative at least socially conservative Democrats to vote their conscience. And Senator Scherer had a stack of amendments and all kinds of stuff, like he was going to debate the thing for days on end or something like that. So psychologically, it kind of set the stage, like, oh God. But the optics were that, yeah, we could be there a long night, all night long to try to do it. But in reality, when it got down to it, if you'd have made somebody mad, they might have changed their vote. We just made the decision on the Senate side, the Republicans did. We just didn't say anything. We just let them debate it. Turns out they had a pretty fair debate on both sides, and there was a couple of strong Catholic Democrat members that strongly opposed the bill, and they've even gotten flack afterwards. I saw Gabe Ramos, who's a senator who was recently appointed out of the southern part of the state, got some flack for speaking up his same opinions at a meeting like this, kind of, only it was at a open forum of some kind. Anyway, he stood up and he says, a couple of folks had said, I'm a Catholic, I believe in abortion because of the women's right to choose and those kind of things. He said, I don't know what Catholic doctrine you studied, but I studied a different one. And it was very impassioned, very powerful. And it was, that might have been the turning point, I don't know.
I'll tell you what, I saw some T-shirts there at the Capitol that said abortion is health care. And I'm pretty sure, I would not consider abortion health care. And if you had to use it for health care, it's absolutely the last option that's available to save a mother. And again, you don't even call it abortion at that point.
If you're needing to end a pregnancy, the pregnancy itself needed to stop at that moment because of medical necessity. Your wife's in delivery. You know very well the answer is a cesarean section.
That's right.
And so, unfortunately, it's become just a late-term contraception, and that's the problem. Is that's become the
Yeah, it's a method of birth control.
And there's so many other options out there. If at that point you're that far into it, there's lots of organizations that are working to get those babies adopted out and help the mothers in that regard. I mean, that is the better path in my mind, and let's protect the value of human life. And that's what to me is upsetting, is we've degraded the value of human life with these types of bills and policies. I don't understand. But
I think what it's done is this year, the New Mexico public finally became aware of what's going on in New Mexico, and that what was appalling them in the news, the national news, has been going on here.
Oh, there was people didn't know.
And people
it took was it Massachusetts or where was it? Vermont.
Vermont and New York.
And took what happened there for people to go, wait a minute, I can't believe that we're trying to do this. And it's like, well, they've been doing it here.
Right.
Yeah, I think I use the terminology in the debate on the floor. It's the status quo in New Mexico, and so. I think what it's done, I think it's really backfired. I think what you're going to see now is there's a real opportunity to roll back a little bit. Once again, New Mexico, I think if you look at the polling, is still overall abortion in general still has more than 50% support. But if you talk about the specifics of late-term abortion, when you know very well that's a viable child, and it's every one of us has seen a baby that's been born 2 months premature. That is obviously nothing more than a baby who's just a little early. But that late-term abortion issue, I think, is a hot issue in New Mexico right now, as well as a 13-year-old can go get an abortion without her parents' knowledge, not consent, but knowledge. I went to watch that movie last night, Unplanned, and the funny thing is it has an R rating. So that same 13-year-old girl could not go watch the movie without her parents' notification. Yes.
Parents even knowing about it. Wow. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for standing up for at least, well, I'll say my beliefs. I don't speak for everybody in our community, but I know we have a strong pro-life community here, and they were very appreciative of that. A couple last things. Recreational marijuana did not go through.
Did not.
So, but we can anticipate that coming back. Do you think it'll come back next year?
I think it'll come back in force. I think what happened was that there was a maneuver at the end that put a state-run program in place of the proposed capitalistic version, I guess you might say. And I think next year, I think the capitalists are going to be well prepared, and they're going to push through something.
I think the Cheech and Chong version will pass next year.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And then out of the gun control bills that did pass, there was a number that were in there, but we got universal background checks, and then was there another one?
There was another one for in case of domestic abuse situation.
right.
That
Which is-
one is fairly innocuous.
Yeah, and it's
because-
largely that way already. They didn't
Yes.
change the law much, and the other one is almost unenforceable.
However, when it was introduced, it was way different.
Right.
It was you could say that your brother-in-law is a danger to society, and,
Right.
and
the red flag one,
That was the
that's
red
one
flag
that,
one with-
that
did
one
not
did
go
not
through.
pass. I don't know where it ended up, but it didn't make it through.
Sure.
Yeah, the red flag was that's pretty scary because basically if I had standing, I'd have to have some reason to do it. I could say, I don't think you're qualified. You're not stable, you're not whatever. And if I was your brother-in-law or your brother or something, I think whatever the rules are, they could take your firearms away. And that one is.
The way I understood it, it's almost like you'd have to go and file a report, like a restraining order report.
Right.
But then you would also, as the accuser, have to show up at the hearing and point out why this person is,
Right.
Right.
and it was a family member, those kind of things. But there's just too many variables in there that doesn't give due process. It's due process,
Right.
Right.
the way our legal system works. And so, certainly 27 counties, I think, passed Second Amendment type
Right.
sanctuary county type laws. A handful of cities, including the city of Farmington, we did a preservation of the Second Amendment. And understanding the idea that, look, a bill or a law that is passed is constitutional until a judge decides it's not constitutional. So we'll see what the outcome is on those things, but definitely unenforceable. I mean, if we do universal background checks, I think we made some comments earlier, then maybe we could do the gun show at the Navajo Casino in the parking lot. And
Because
then
the
doesn't
rules
apply there.
change,
The rules
right.
change.
or if you're in Colorado.
So
or
if you
across the
still
border.
wanted to get a gun without doing a background check, you can still do it.
That's right.
And that's, anyways, we can kind of see the frustration there.
Well, there was no way to enforce if two people who know each other decided not to do it. There is no registry of firearms out there, so it would take a major investigation to determine that I actually own the gun that I'm trying to sell to you.
And if you didn't do the
that's-
background check, then
right.
it's a misdemeanor,
Right,
right? And then in order to have a misdemeanor, there has to be a witness,
right.
Yeah.
right? So I guess it all sounds good if you just want gun control, and it makes it sound better that we're going to be doing background checks on everybody.
It was disappointing when 30 of the 33 sheriffs show up and say that they are against it, that this is not in the benefit to the public health and safety of New Mexico citizens, and for them to be referred to as a few rogue sheriffs. And a few, 30 out of 33,
Yeah.
that's not a few. That's why this tax increase is considered a reasonable tax increase.
We got to get to the business of managing New Mexico and stop thinking on these national levels in regards to how we govern
That's
our
right.
state. You know,
That's right.
we are very different in regards to Washington, D.C., and the needs here are different than Washington, D.C., and we need to promote these people, we need to promote private business, and we need to listen to our constituents and what they believe in, not what lawyers from California believe in or lawyers from D.C. believe in. That just throws me
Well,
off. I'm sitting at all these hearings, and two of the people who wrote 489 are from California. They're lawyers from California, and they got to sit at the table to talk about these things, and there's no concern in my mind from their point of view of what New Mexicans really want.
Well, probably a big piece of legislation that passed out is going to be probably one of the major pieces of legislation that we look back on is we're not going to allow 18-year-olds to go to a tanning salon anymore.
Thank
So,
goodness.
they're going to have to revert probably to those more dangerous back alley tanning sessions.
Did the
Right.
circus education bill get anywhere? I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you
Yes.
did. You saw that, right? And people,
I saw
it
it.
looked
I don't
like a
know.
satirical joke,
Right.
and it wasn't. Somebody actually spent time.
Oh, there were a lot of
put
There
that together.
there
a lot
was
of
literally
bills
that bill said that they were going to teach clowning.
Yeah.
And I think that we have 112 teachers there in the legislature.
Sometimes reason prevails. There was an anti-fracking bill
Right.
that was a serious attempt by a new legislator, the one that was appointed to fill Cisco McSorley, who resigned to become an executive with the administration. Cedillo Lopez, Senator Cedillo Lopez, introduced it, and there were some House sponsors. In fact, one of our local, Representative Allison, I believe, was on that bill.
Yeah.
One of our local people, to ban fracking for 4 years to study.
Oh
That was
my
the
gosh.
premise of the bill. that bill never even got a hearing, as far as I know.
Thank goodness,
yeah.
right? So
Oh,
reason
yeah.
prevails. I mean, we've been fracking for 60 years. What else do we need to study?
Yeah. Well, it's never
Still,
never happened.
there's still things that can be done by executive order, and one of those things that we're concerned about is the methane, potential methane rules that would
Right.
apply. That's still out there, so we're still going to be in a little bit of a fight.
Well, and I
for
understand there's some
economy.
issues have cropped up recently with one of our local producers with the either Environment or the Oil Conservation Division, I don't know which one, giving them some static over a procedure that they've been using in this area for decades.
Right.
And so the administration has changed its philosophy a lot, which you normally expect, but it may or may not be very good for oil and gas.
Well, people got to stay engaged. They got to stay aware. I hope that there's at least a public component that's allowed for people to come out for these hearings. And then, of course, it's about actually going out to those hearings when those opportunities arise and to voice your opinion. There's a lot of concern of people in San Juan County where they feel like their voice isn't heard anymore and that they're just talking into thin air. I made the comment that I feel like sometimes we're standing in the middle of a desert and we're the only people there screaming. They're sitting right in front of us, but they're not hearing anything that we're saying. Right. And it's frustrating, but it shouldn't stop people from actually going through the process and taking action and being engaged in the right ways.
Right.
In the right ways.
One of the real problems, last election, everybody voted against Donald Trump. Not everybody. A lot of people voted against Donald Trump. They didn't necessarily vet the person they were voting for or against. It wasn't just Republicans. Sure. It was they even took out some of the more conservative, more reasonable Democrats that we've worked with, who've been good for the state over time. 2 or 3 of those lost their elections, and again, it was more of a backlash against Donald Trump. Which elections are important, and you've got to vote for the person, and not just because of some overriding philosophy.
Right.
And we didn't have that.
Where Donald Trump was really very popular in the rural part of the state. We lost 10 seats in the House, mostly in Albuquerque and Las Cruces area.
Right.
So,
the bigger centers.
and that's where Donald Trump was polling 20% down to Hillary Clinton.
Sure. Well, gentlemen, let's kind of we'll kind of end here. I just want to get a feel. What could people in San Juan County say that we won out of the session, so to speak? I know there was some capital outlay money and some other things that happened there. So
there's some
what were
$30 million or so coming to the county in various forms for various projects. Some flood control for the city of Farmington, the bypass road in Aztec, some water system improvements for Bloomfield, the Farmers Mutual ditch that's been falling off the cliff out here west of town. There's some money for that. Some security money for the college. What did I forget, Rod? There's a bunch of, there are a lot of things.
We got money for the college. We got money for San Juan Regional Medical Center.
Right.
They had several projects that are very expensive. And as you know, Mayor, you'll give us your list of 4 or 5 projects that you want, and if we can help you fund one of them fully, that allows you as a to work your budget around it. And that's how it is with the college and with the hospital as well. We help them. Obviously, we can't. There's always more needs than there is money. Yeah. But if you can take out a big project, and I've got to say, I've got to give credit to all of the legislators who come before me. Literally, I just show up and we have a game plan, and that is, okay, guys, we have this much combined money. We're not going to give $50 or $500, or we're not going to partially fund anything because we want those projects to actually get completed. In San Juan County, from the time I got there, Steve and the rest of the folks up there sit down and put out a big sheet and say, these are our projects, what can we do?
Right. And we don't necessarily take credit for districts. Some of the projects are in my district, some are in Rod's, some of them are Senator Scher's, whatever it is. We look and see, obviously, the ditch west of town supplies water to the western part of the county, drinking and irrigation. That's critical. They've got to have that, and that's not in my district. That's in Senator Scher's district, and it's not in Rod's district. It's in Anthony's, I believe, Representative Allison's. So, but the people who live out there need the project, and so we all put our funds
Well, I
in
will
there to
say,
try to cover
I
it.
heard compliments from Santa Fe from people who said, man, I wish that our senators and representatives did what yours do, because we feel like we could get a lot more done on these big projects. So kudos to you guys for having that type of mentality.
Thank you.
You know, it's easy though, because people might live in my district, but if they work in Steve's district, that's still mine and
interests.
Steve's constituents.
Until 30 days before the next election, nobody knows whose district is what anyway.
Right.
You know, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So, yeah.
Any final comments that you guys would like to make in regards to the session? Or for
We're gonna have another tough session next year. Then there will be an election after that. I don't think things will change that much drastically up here. But around the rest of the state, if anybody has any influence in some of the metro areas of Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Cruces, that part of the state, we need some help with some, I don't care what their party is, but we need some responsible legislators, and we don't have as many as we need in Santa Fe.
Ditto.
Ditto. Ditto. I like it. That's a strong statement, and that's a fact. And we've got issues going on here in the county, and people are coming forward now to say, I should have got involved sooner. And it's important to stay on top of these things, because the area, I want to say the climate is changing, so to speak, but it is. I mean, things are changing quickly, and they're moving in directions that are going to surprise folks if you don't pay attention for a year or two, and you come back and go, wait a minute, what's going on? So taking the time to be engaged, reading the news. There's a lot of organizations, obviously, that are dedicated to keeping people informed of what goes on in Santa Fe, what goes on in Washington, D.C., and of course what goes on here in the city. Get involved in those groups and make sure you understand it. So, well, I appreciate all the work that you and our other legislators have done during this session. I know it was not easy, and I just can't thank you guys enough for working hard for us. So. We thank you for tuning in to the Mayor's Table as always. If you have any ideas, subjects you'd like us to talk about here, please reach out to me at nduckett@fmtn.org. Our next episode is on April 15th, where we'll be covering the April 6th Canyon Cleanup that will be going on, and that is this Saturday at 8 a.m. at Glade and Pinion. Please come out. There's going to be food and beverages. There's going to be free trash bags. There's going to be raffle prizes. Lots of great activities going on as we clean up. I call it spring cleaning of the canyon to prepare us for a great spring and summer of outdoor recreation here in the city of Farmington. So tune in. Thanks for being here today. And that is all for the Mayor's Table.